Special Project, John Bledsoe and Ken Mishu have been leading the charge on drafting the charter. And with that, I'll turn it over to Jonathan to give an overview of the current writing. And our plan is we've got 3 weeks from today prior to our next council meeting. And at the next council meeting, we will ask the council to adopt a resolution to support approving the final draft of the charter and sending it to the General Assembly during their 2024 general session.
That's just local legislation.
That's right. That's right. Mr. Mayor and council members, appreciate your time today and appreciate you letting us do this project. I think it's a very important project for the city, and we've been honored to handle it and be a part of it. Let me just kind of walk you through what we've done since the last work session on this, I believe in February or March, early spring. We have gone through and researched the issues that you asked us to research. We've received some public comments. I know you've received a lot of comments. We've received comments from every department. We've met with the professional staff at the city to fine tune the language. We've done that a number of times. We've made the changes that you've requested on policy decisions in this. And then we've gone through and ensured as well that the charter is in compliance with state law. There have been some recent changes in state law that affected a couple of things. We tried to provide clarity where that was needed and tried to continue to give you a broad grant of powers, which is really what this is designed to do, to give you the broadest powers going forward that you can have. We've also considered the code of ordinances and made some changes in light of it. You know that we've been evaluating the code and redoing the code at the same time. And so it's been helpful to compare both and to make some changes that to have consistency there. Let me just go through some of the bigger changes. I'm not going to go through all the little tweaks, and you know, there's.
Excuse me a minute, Joe. Is Dennis dialed in or whatever?
We could pause, Jorge.
Yes, I'm here.
Okay.
Oh, there he is. Okay.
I'm here.
Looks like you're in a tough spot there, Dennis.
Well, it's kind of beachy here.
The first major issue, I believe, was section 2.11. In our last meeting, you may recall, there were some questions about residency requirements in the election and providing clarity on that. We've measured the time for the requirements from the date of the election, and we've also included a definition of residency as domicile. And so if someone was running for office and they had to move out temporarily, house fire, flood, something like that, that does not preclude the person from holding office, because it is your domicile that's considered, and domicile is where you intend to have your permanent residency. So that was the first major change. Moving to section 3.16. There were just a couple of tweaks there. When the charter is enacted, we want to make sure that all the positions remain the same, salaries remain the same, everything remains the same, nothing's affected on a day-to-day operational basis by the enactment of the charter. And so that's what 3.16 says. Comes from the model, but we were asked to tweak that to make sure that in terms of salary changes and things like that, there's no confusion on the fact that mayor and council can delegate authority to do certain things, including changing salaries. That's certainly not something you want to vote on every time. So just a small change there. Section 3.17 is one of the bigger changes. We moved the Public Works Committee, as well as a number of other committees that were not formed by the original charter, from the charter to the ordinances. Those are things that really should be in the ordinances, because you're going to make changes to them over the years. There may be differences in composition, differences in the way you want things done. And so that's been moved to the ordinances on 3.17. On 4.11D. This is a change that deals with state law. The model charter, when it was put in place, after it was put in place, there was a change in state law. There's code section 3632 2.1 became effective. Originally, municipal court judges, like everybody else, they were employees at will. That's generally the desire, to have city employees be employees at will, just like every other employee in Georgia would typically be, unless you have a contract. State law changed that and gave some reasons that a municipal court judge would be removed. So it is not purely an at-will position anymore. And so we tweaked that to just say judges serve at will and may be removed by office unless otherwise provided by ordinance or other law. And I talked to Rushi Patel at GMA about that change. He acknowledged that the code section changed after the model and they just had not updated it. He said that that is the exact way that they're recommending that people make that change to make sure that it's in compliance, just to add that exception. Because state law may change in the future and you may go back to an at-will status. We don't know what will happen in the future. That gives you the flexibility and it keeps the charter in compliance with state law. So that's what we've done there. The next big change is Article 7. And you'll see that on page 31 of your red line. Article 7 is the independent school system provision. And the majority of this came from the school system's attorney. We received a draft from them. The things that they originally wanted to accomplish from this were to, number one, make sure that the school system stayed in place. As you may know, the Constitution was amended in 2015 to provide that there are no more independent school systems. And so you have to relate back to have an independent school system. And this provision in the charter does that. The other thing that they wanted to do was to be able to issue their own debt. And that is provided for in here as well. Now, we had a few comments on this from department heads and the professional staff. And so we've made a few changes to this. I just want to highlight that. It's kind of hard to tell what we've changed because the red line shows the changes from February to now, which are all of the changes, including the school systems changes. So it doesn't really highlight our tweaks to it. But in section 7.4, there is a change about halfway through or so because there was a concern about whether this allowing the school system to incur debt would affect the city's debt limit. As you know, the city, like all other political subdivisions, has an obligation not to exceed 10% of the assessed value of the property. And that's a constitutional provision. And so what we've said in here is, however, any debt which may limit, alter, or otherwise affect the ability of the city of Dalton to also incur debt shall first be approved by the city of Dalton. And so that change should take care of that issue if there is any instance where that would affect or limit the city's debt. The Board of Education would have to come to the city first. We have passed that on to the school systems attorney. The school systems attorney had some concerns about that. I think they liked it the way that they originally had it, but they have not provided us any type of assurances that we would never be in a position where that could be an issue. So that's a sort of a safety fallback for the city. I think it's something that's needed. It's something that we recommend, and I think it's something that
just quick question, I'll make sure I'm understanding.
Sure.
So like, how are they doing it right as of right now?
Say that again.
Right now, they would come to us to get debt, right?
Right. That's the way it's working now.
but they don't want to come to us. That's the way they drew it up first, right?
Right.
And then you went back and said, let's kind of keep it the way it is.
Well, what it says now, with this change is they can issue their own debt, but if it is going to affect the city of Dalton's, ability to incur debt, they have to first come to you.
So, I mean, obviously it could have an effect. We just don't know when the effect
Yeah.
will be.
That's right.
I think the city then has to have the authority over it. Period.
And that's essentially what this says. It says they've got to come to you.
Okay.
And unless the school system can provide some sort of concrete example where this is never going to impact the city, and I don't think they can. I think you need to leave this in.
Yeah.
Well, and two, if they go through the building authority, that's a city of Dalton authority, right? So
Yeah. Yeah. So revenue bonds aren't part of this. So how do you need to word it then?
So I think the way we have it means they have to come to you
What,
unless it's a
like
revenue
a few
bond.
weeks ago, when they were wanting to do a revenue bond and go around having to have a referendum, it did come before us on that occasion.
it was at a preliminary level, they weren't prepared to officially ask that. They were just briefing the council because they knew it would have to come before the council.
Nothing's been approved on that.
No, but I'm hearing, I guess I'm not, so in the future, you're saying that when they just do revenue bonds to the building authority, it won't necessarily have to come through us?
Well, I think it's that it's written in here now, the way it's written is they have to come to the council to have it approved.
Regard.
I think it needs to
Right.
change.
And Jonathan's team has made that revision because they asked for that to be removed, and we've come back with
Is that
this.
correct, Jonathan? Even on revenue bonds, they'd still have to come before us to get our approval?
If it affects your debt limit, unless there's some IGA or something otherwise, if it affects your debt limit, they have to come to you.
I just don't want them to be able to go ahead and get something and then say later on down the line, then we find out it's affected.
The way this is written, they're not authorized to do that, and they need to figure that out first.
Okay.
And I'm not sure of a situation where it wouldn't affect it. And that's why we've got this in here this way. Again, the school systems attorney says that, oh, it shouldn't be an issue, and
Even though.
I've
it's
said we'll
revenue
provide
bonds,
us
it would affect
authority.
our debt
It's not an
limit.
issue to them.
it's not.
Yeah.
That's correct.
But the reason I guess they're coming before the council now is because it's going through the building authority. We may want to add some language that states, in addition to, any debt that would affect the city's, debt issuance capacity, also any bonds to be routed through the building authority, even though they don't affect that debt rating, they would still have to come, since the council appoints the building authority.
If you want it that way, we can make that change, certainly.
The council has a member and the mayor's on that, I think.
Right.
Yeah.
So for those reasons, it's probably still tracking with past actions to bring those before the council, even though they don't affect the city's debt rating. They could go through another authority, right, though, which is not controlled. So I think the cleanup language would just be to add if they are proposing to go through the City of Dalton Building Authority as opposed to the Joint Development Authority or the Housing Authority, which folks can do that. That would be the cleanup. I think we want to make note of.
Sure. I thought the way you had it in here now, they have to come to the council, period.
They have to come to the council if it at all has a possibility of affecting your debt, which I think it does. We didn't go through and try to research each scenario where, maybe it didn't affect you.
Just keep it broad like.
I put it on the school system's attorney to come back with us
Yeah.
with some authority and we've not heard back.
I think the only issue, Mayor, is Cindy's saying that the revenue bond does not affect
I
our,
don't care.
okay.
See, you never know in the future what could happen. And to me, just keep it, obviously some of their debt could have an effect. We don't want to be parsing every time what debt does and what debt doesn't.
Okay.
So as long as they come to us first. Basically,
So-
that's what he's saying.
Okay, we can do that.
Short of a GO bond, I mean, their voters would have to approve that if they do a GO.
We'll make that change.
Well,
I mean-
I didn't follow the end of that.
They're going to keep it just the way it is, basically. They have to come to y'all.
Well, we're just going to make it clear that they come to you for anything. For any
Minus the
issues of debt.
GO.
That's what it sounded like you'd prefer. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there may be a time when we have to save them from themselves.
Okay. All right. We'll make that change and we'll circulate.
From this section, is there anything that y'all seen that the city of Dalton would be responsible for if something happened, whether it be tort, debt, anything else? with
On the school system.
With the school system.
So there are a couple other things. Just let me tell you the things that we changed. I don't think there's anything in terms of tort or anything like that, but we did tweak a couple of things in section 7.7. We talked to Ms. Jackson about the way that this is actually done. They were wanting a semi-monthly payment and they were wanting accountings from the city, and that really doesn't work that way. It comes monthly and it comes from the Whitfield County Tax Commissioner's Office. And so we made those changes in 7.7. We've made another change in 7.8, a couple of other changes, similar changes to 7.7 about the tax commissioner. But they also had in the last sentence that any levy and assessment shall be made at 100% of the taxable property fair market value. We put in there that it may be made at that percentage, and that's something that you can decide to change further if you'd like to do so. We also put that it was subject to any limitation by ordinance or other law, so that you have some flexibility going forward with that as well. So that's on the last sentence of 7.8.
And what that relates to, as we've talked before, the state constitution puts a 20 mil cap on county school districts unless you had a higher cap when the constitution language was prepared, and a 14 mil on a 40% equivalency is like 35. So under the current charter,
That's state law?
state constitution,
That's not our charter?
our charter has a higher cap, and it existed prior to the state constitution language, which capped it at 20 mils. And what Jonathan has said in this last sentence is that the school system's attorney requested that it say shall be made at 100%, and Jonathan revised it to may, and it shall be subject to any limitation proposed by the council under ordinance. So that could be revised by ordinance change.
So what governs that millage rate?
State constitution. However, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think their 14 mil was put in effect prior to the constitution language, which would allow it to remain.
But if somebody changed that 14 mils, who's got the power to do that?
I think
The
it must be done by local act of legislature.
Well, the Constitution says if you eliminate the cap or increase the cap, not lower the cap, but increase or remove it, it's got to go to the voters. The voters have to make that call
To the vote.
to the voters to remove the cap or to increase the cap. It has no language about lowering the cap, and that's only contained within the city charter. So to me, that power is vested with the council.
I believe that's correct.
Is that to, like, say, what did we have? You said it was 20% before this 14.
No, the state constitution limits school districts at 20 mills
Plus debt.
Count.
plus debt
That's right.
on a 40% equivalency. And our charter puts the limit at 14 mills, but it's on 100%. So if their millage went to 14 mills, it's like a 35 mil equivalency
Period. Count.
to 20.
Still think though, if this language at a rate not to exceed 14 mils, I don't think it would be I don't think the council could change that. I think it would have to go back to the legislature in a local act. Don't you think, Jonathan?
We can research that. I've not looked into that again.
But I mean-
This came primarily from the school system.
Right, but see, this is also going to be approved by the legislature.
I think you'd have to make a determination about whether a home rule could change, could
Yeah, that's.
could
what-
deal with it.
So I'll make a note to look into that further and just make sure that we're good on that.
I guess significant thing for us talking here today, though, is it's not going to change the way it is right now.
Right. Right.
Actually, I think it vests a little bit more authority with the council than what our current charter had. Because the current charter didn't have any language about subject to any limitation of ordinance.
Keep in mind too, even though when you say their revenue bonds don't affect our debt limit, we're taxing the same people.
We'll make those notes.
And I'll just point out, this school section, you all have never seen this in a public meeting. We didn't have this from the school system's attorney when we got together back in March. So this is kind of the first time y'all are seeing the school section.
So as you go through it, let us know if you see other things. We can change it, and take comments by email and make other changes. The next significant section is the Dalton Utilities portion. 8.17. There were really two issues that came up in the last meeting. The first was the transfer payment in 8.17. We took out the language that there be an agreement by mayor and council of the board on the transfer payment, and it just says now that it's determined by mayor and council. And then on section 8.19, this was the provision about a referendum for the disposition of assets of the utility. We took this out on the direction of council at the last meeting.
So that one was stricken in its entirety.
Right, we haven't made any changes that would
Well,
affect
since
that.
those bonds were paid off, it wasn't applicable anymore.
It's in the ordinance, that's in place. This shouldn't affect that.
You better look at that because I thought that was in the one that they paid off. Even if they issue a new bond, it's subject to that. Okay.
We could, Jonathan and I were just discussing, we could add a qualifier in the section that says, as determined by the council or any other prevailing ordinance that's in effect at the time of the transfer payment calculation. But otherwise, this says the council determines what that sum shall be each year.
And we have a repealer section at the end that says, the things that are specifically in conflict are repealed, the other things stay in place. And so, I'd take the position that it stays in place, but we can certainly add that to clarify. The next section, section 9.19. This is actually, I'm sorry, 9.9.1.
This whole article, yeah.
Yeah, 9.11, the whole article of section 9 relating to Public Safety Commission. We took that out just because that has been moved to the ordinances now. Again, that's one of those things that you may want to change over the years. In fact, we've taken some comments about changing the composition, having law enforcement members on the Public Safety Commission.
Public safety member, I think it could be a firefighter.
Public safety, right. A public safety member on it, and those are changes you don't want to make in your charter. They're changes that are better made in an ordinance, so that's where that is now. We did the same thing with 11.23, the Rec Commission. That's just been moved to the ordinances.
What does the green mean?
Some of these came out green, and I'm not sure why.
Because one of us, or one of our secretaries made a change. So it's just all in it. But, if we could vote on it.
Okay.
That's really it. Those are
Yeah,
the big highlights.
Basically, the core language about the police and fire department remain within Article 9 of the charter. Everything having to do with the commission has been moved to the code of ordinances. And I think I circulated a copy of that draft in email. I think it's chapter 1 or 2.
To administration. And that is a work in progress. We are still adding numbers and, doing the moving around things in order. But those key things of having the Public Safety Commission, having the Rec Commission, those things in that section, that's where they will be.
Really, the only commission and authorities that remain are those that exclusively receive their vesting authority through the charter and would be essentially undone if they're removed.
That's correct.
These changes be made before or after the charter.
So we anticipate that the ordinances will be done before the charter. This is, as soon as you approve it, it's going to go to the legislature. And we would anticipate that this will be done well before governor signs it.
Because the governor's typically not, signing things until 30, 60 days after the session's over. So that gives us basically the first quarter to do all of the ordinance changes, which will be okay because the existing charter remains in effect until it's executed into law. So as long as we have the code revisions basically dealt with by the end of quarter 1, we should be well on track that the code of ordinances would be updated. Then a month or a month and a half later, the charter would be signed into law.
So this Recreation Commission, that's moved to ordinance.
To chapter 2 admin. We moved the Public Safety Commission, Public Works Committee, and the Rec Commission. And basically what's left is the Building Authority, the Downtown Development Authority, the Airport Authority. What am I missing?
Where's Dalton Utilities?
They're still in the
They're still
charter,
there. Dalton Utilities is still in the charter.
Article 8.
So if the school doesn't come back, then it's just, or if they come back, then you just,
Well,
you just know, but you don't think they'll come back.
you have the authority to make the decisions you want to make. We have not heard back from the school system so far. Certainly let you know if we do.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but the Board of Education was established through the charter. So its vesting authority is through the charter. And in fact, the current charter talks about how to set up a board in 1910 and those types of things. So it really has no other organizing document outside of the city charter.
That's true. city and the school system both are a creature of the legislature.
That's right.
I'll have other questions.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you again. Again, appreciate the opportunity to do this.
I want to just again thank Jonathan and Ken and their teams because this is really the product of a year's worth of work. I want to thank Bernadette as well for kind of leading the charge. As you can imagine, you've got to evaluate if you pull one lever, what other levers may be affected. And this has taken quite some time to get a finished product to this point.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan.
This we're adjourned until 6.
What are we gonna do?
Talk about football.
I didn't talk long enough, huh?
Yeah, when you know, we're in.